In this video, I'm going to show you an example of a heavy metal detox on a nutritional balancing program. And I'm going to show you 3 consecutive hair tests spanning 1 year in time. And we'll go through the tests and show you what happened with the toxic metals. Okay, so this is a 61-year-old male, lives on the West Coast, and this test is from January of 2022. First test, we're just going to look at the toxic metals here. We're not really going to do much of an analysis of the whole test. But in short, this person was a slow oxidizer. He had lower adrenal activity, lower thyroid activity, and a slower metabolism. And if you look at his toxic metals down here, you can see that his mercury was a little elevated, and that was from eating fish, which is contaminated with mercury. And his aluminum level was slightly elevated as well. And that's very common, hard to avoid. Aluminum shows up in everyone's hair because it's so prevalent on Earth. Now, if you look at his other toxic metals, arsenic, cadmium, lead, those were all relatively low. Nickel as well. And as I tell people who do a hair test, that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have any of those metals in your body. This is just what's showing up in the hair over the past 3 or 4 months. And usually the toxic metals are buried deeper in the body and they're stored in various organs and various glands. So we did another hair test about 6 months later, and he had very similar pattern, very good improvement in his potassium level. So his oxidation rate increased quite a bit initially. That was 6 months on the program. And usually once that happens, when a person's metabolism starts to increase, they start to eliminate toxic metals and other toxic chemicals in their body. Their body has more energy, and so they're better able to eliminate them. So you'll see here with this toxic metals section, he had a increase in just about all of the toxic metals. Yeah, I think it was all of the toxic metals. So if you look at his lead went from 0.32 to 0.234, which is almost a 10 times increase. So that's very significant. His mercury level almost doubled, also significant. His cadmium level went from 0.002 to 0.017. So that's more than 10 times increase. Arsenic level more than doubled, and his aluminum level increased slightly, and then his nickel level went up a little bit as well. And so he's got a lot of detoxification occurring here. And I want to point out that the nutritional balancing program that we set up for this guy and that we set up for everyone does not focus on specific toxic metals. So we're not targeting any particular toxic metal to detoxify from the body, which is different from some approaches which try to pull various metals out of the body. Instead, what we're doing is we're replenishing the body, we're increasing energy production, improving the eliminative organs, and the body tends to eliminate these toxic metals on its own. So that's a much safer and more gentler way of removing toxic metals. So this was a great response after 6 months on a nutritional balancing program. The removal of these toxic metals is going to significantly improve the functioning of his organs, glands, and his overall health. I also want to point out that he's most likely was eliminating many more toxic metals and chemicals at the same time. This test is only measuring a few of the toxic metals, and of course it doesn't measure toxic chemicals, but there is likely a pretty significant elimination of other chemicals and metals in his body. Now, when we move on to his third test, this was about 1 year after the initial test, so 6 months after the second test here. We can see that the pattern up here changed quite a bit. His oxidation rate increased even more. Calcium, magnesium levels came into better balance. And then we look at the toxic metal section, and actually you'll see that the elimination has ceased for many of these metals. The arsenic level went down to 0.001, cadmium 0.002, mercury went down, lead went way down, back to almost where it was initially. So you can see that the body has stopped eliminating those metals for now. That doesn't mean that he's eliminated all of those metals from his body. It just tends to happen in spurts. And the body shifts and makes different changes. So what's going on now is he's actually eliminating a lot more aluminum, it looks like. His aluminum level just about doubled. But all the other toxic metals went down. And so there's significant changes going on here in his body. And this doesn't occur with most nutrition programs, and it definitely doesn't occur if you just leave things on its own and continue what you're doing. Heavy metals, they're pretty difficult to get out of the body unless you actually have a targeted approach to replenish the body and balance body chemistry. That's how we do it. Much safer and effective way for eliminating toxic metals.